Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Directed by Junie. I make videos about art and I also make art. Today in this art of collection, I was inspired to talk about Crooklyn because I was on this Twitter thread where somebody asked if there were any coming of age movies about Black girl leading characters. And a lot of people were like, well, Eve's Bayou was there. Well, insert other movie. And I was like, nobody's talking about Crooklyn. Chapter 1, who is Spike Lee? So Spike Lee hails from Atlanta, Georgia. He is widely known as a pioneer in Black filmmaking, leading the charge in 90s Black New Wave. He attended Morehouse College for his Bachelor of Fine Arts degree. And then he took it a step further and got his master's at NYU Tisch, which is where he's at as a tenured film professor and an artistic director. His career spans over 30 years for notable films like Malcolm X, School Days, Do the Right Thing. If you haven't seen any of those, please do. So Crooklyn is Spike's 7th film, and it's also semi-autobiographical. So his sister, Joie, wrote a script called Hot Peas and Butter, which I feel like is pretty cool. We don't see that many like sibling films or family films aside from maybe like the Wayans brothers. This movie is set against such a luscious and diverse backdrop of what Crooklyn looked like in the 1970s, and it holds a beautiful narrative about coming of age. And while this is a deeply personal film, it also feels universal because it resonates with people, no matter what age you are, no matter what decade you're from. Chapter 2, pre-gentrified Fort Greene. So Crooklyn unfolds through the eyes of a 9-year-old Troy Carmichael who lives in the Bedford-Stuyvesant neighborhood of Brooklyn, New York. In this film, we see like a opening credit sequence that brings you into the rose-tinted full swing of 70s Fort Greene. So the kids are outside, they're playing street games like stickball. They said Johnny on the Pony. I have no idea what that is. In the midst of the Carmichael family, there's Troy, but there's also her brothers, Clinton, Wendell, Nate, and Joseph. And then their parents are Carolyn, who is a schoolhouse teacher, and Woody, who is a jazz musician. We see finances become a source of stress for this family because Woody wants to pursue music, but in his own way and on his own terms. And I feel like this is connected to, again, that signifier that things are changing in that neighborhood, that rent is raising, right? I was reading this article that came out in 1978 called Fort Greene in Trouble or a Transition. And an interviewee said, today you can get a brownstone for $50,000. You're getting it cheap. Prices have more than doubled over the last 6 years. When I visit New York or when I'm looking at a brownstone, I'm looking at a brownstone like that main character in Blade Runner 2049, where he's looking at a hologram of like his dream girl and she's like, you look lonely, I can fix that. You know, like it feels unattainable. It feels like that can never happen for me. So chapter 3, what is coming of age? According to Studio Binder, the coming of age genre is described as centered around the themes of youth, growing up, maturation, with a strong focus on a central character arc. So the typical tropes of coming-of-age films include self-discovery and major life changes around someone who is moving into a different stage of their life. Some of my favorites are definitely like Moonlight, The Wood, The Graduate. A lot of people don't talk about Dope, but I really like Dope too. Lady Bird is definitely a good one. When you hear coming-of-age movie, you probably think of those white characters with quirky names who live in like a small town or something, and they're thinking of doing something big, like right before high school graduation or whatever. But the truth is that coming of age is a spectrum. We're always coming of age.
We all say true.
Like even now at 24 years old, I feel I still have so much to learn. And when you're nearing your mid-20s, you have so much life to experience, and you're finally like realizing things about yourself that you might have not realized when you were a teenager. And while I do feel like being a teenager is a very formative coming of age like landmark, that is not the only landmark to exist in all of our life. You know what I mean? Most of the time when we think about movies, coming of age movies with Black characters, there's a lot of trauma centered in them. There's a lot of violence. And I think that's why I liked The Wood so much, because even though they're in Los Angeles and they encounter gangs, the movie is not about gang violence. It's not like Boys in the Hood. Not to say that those films don't have their own place and that they can exist, because there is a market for everything. But I just feel like there should be a balance there. Chapter 3, Troy, a look into Black girlhood. In an IndieWire interview, Joie Lee said, I wanted to tell my story cinematically. At that time, there was a dearth of films about Black families and Black girlhood. I didn't see myself reflected in cinema, so I wanted to tell a story about my childhood, and at that point it was called Hot Peas and Butter. So the main character, Troy, looks to be an unmovable wall, like similar to her mom. Because she's the only daughter in a household full of brothers, this shapes her resilience and perspective on life.
Alright already, I said I was sorry.
And I also like this environment for Troy because Fort Greene isn't just a place, it characterizes Troy's personality. This place is part of her routine and her source of comfort. I feel that there was more potential for Troy. She's such an interesting and informative lens for this type of movie, and I wish she would have been given more interiority. But because this movie covers just the larger scope of growing up in the 70s, we don't get that perspective. We're pretty much everywhere else, even if we are seeing things from Troy's perspective. Chapter 4, Get Off My Stoop. The cinematographer, Arthur Jaffa, said, I had a lot of experimental ideas that I think Spike thought were a bit too extreme. I was very much fascinated with the idea of evoking the 70s in a way that was going to be nuanced with psychedelic colors and taking inspiration from Jet magazine. I still feel like the inspiration from Jet magazine is very clear. Crooklyn's characterization of New York leaps off the screen. I mean, the color grading is so saturated. In the opening credit sequence, we hear People Make the World Go Round by the Stylistics. The licenses to popular songs at that time were a lot cheaper. I wish they were cheaper now, so they were able to buy like rights to James Brown, Curtis Mayfield, the Jackson 5, a lot of Motown and soul classics. We're also seeing what Brooklyn at large is like. We see the ice cream man. We experience vignettes of like neighborly interactions. We see the neighbor, Tony Eyes.
Okay, all right, little mister, I saw you.
We see the Puerto Ricans and the West Indians playing dominoes outside. We see Spike Lee as a glue huffing junkie. Chapter 5, Growing Pains. The pivotal moment of this movie is when Troy's mother falls ill, and we get small indications that something might be wrong. When I was younger watching this movie, I was like, why is she trying to shove Troy off into the extended family? A marker of coming of age for me has always been when a character enters that moment of strife, and this definitely happens to Troy. And this level of emotional depth in the film, how it portrays grief and responsibility all through the lens of a small child, really sticks with me, and that's what draws me to it. Chapter 6, Southern Anamorphic Lens. When Troy visits her family in Virginia, there's a clear distinction that happens due to an anamorphic lens that makes objects appear stretched out and close together. The lens choice is a visual representation of Troy's discomfort and unfamiliarity with Virginia and her family. I noticed even the color grading is different. In Fort Greene, the color grading is very warm and there's natural sunlight coming through. But when we're in Virginia, the colors are almost pale. Like when we're inside the aunt's or grandmother's house, I can't remember which, it's very pink and beige in there. Almost everything looks lost in translation. Like the colors are kind of lifeless. Most of the scenes in Virginia are shot in this static, straightforward way. And I think that is also symbolic of how Troy feels stuck in the environment. Like she can't necessarily leave because she's only 9. The shots and the camera angles we get when we're back in Brooklyn are very telling of the comfort and the fluidity and the flow of things out in Brooklyn. In conclusion, while Crooklyn meanders and has an unconventional plot, this was actually what I enjoyed about the movie so much. These fragments of memories and like close-up childhood moments mirrors the way that we would remember childhood. If anything, its cultural significance in portraying Black childhood and family life with nuance is what makes Crooklyn such a good movie. Because there's not much to say politically about this movie, I feel that Crooklyn goes largely unnoticed when talking about Spike Lee's movies, but it's really good. I feel like if you just have a day, preferably on a Sunday, when you don't have much to do and you just want to watch something that makes you feel warm inside, turn this movie on and see how you feel about it. Overall, it is so resonant and it is so beautiful. Overall, I want to know like what you guys thought about this movie if you've seen it. If you have any other recommendations for coming of age movies, or if you have recommendations for films that I should also talk about, let me know in the comments. And I don't know, guys. I think that's it. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.